Ladies and gentlemen, in the blue corner, standing at a sleek 5'11", 245 pounds, the tumultuous tempest of technique, Thomas Lilly. And in the red corner, at a curvaceous 5'11", 315 pounds, the jovial juggernaut of judgment, John Cheryl Sheridan. A meeting of the masters of mastication. Turn your attention as they delve deep into all things lifting and more. This is Peak Speak.
So we're back.
This is Peak Speak.
It is. It's
Yeah.
Peak Speak. This
So
is our
let's talk about
podcast about
peaking.
yeah. We're actually. What are we? I don't even know how many episodes we've done. I was making like I'm going to look that up. Like 14.
Well,
or
on
something?
on Spotify it's 15, but we've got how many in the bank? 3 in the bank? 2 in the bank?
Maybe even 4.
This is like 19, no 20.
Yeah, we're as prepared as we have been that one time that we recorded 4 episodes in a weekend and then didn't release them for 18 months.
Yeah. This
Fucking
is good.
professionals.
If only the people could see the conversations before we start recording. It's like, yeah, let's record at 6:30. Hang on, emergency
It's
poo. Hang on, I need to kiss my
7:50.
dog.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah.
All right.
Professionals.
So Pro Raw is coming up very soon. We've got Pro Raw in like 7 weeks. Pro Raw,
And there's a bunch of
competitions.
I think this is the time of year where this conversation is a really important one to have because it's the sort of time of year that, especially for any of the GPC powerlifters that follow us, most of you are probably preparing for states or some other big comp in the lead up to nationals, be it states or Pro Raw or something like that. So I think discussion around peaking is an interesting one to have.
For sure. I think it's one of those things, well, I know it's one of those things that it's really easy to get right, but it's also really easy to screw up completely. And there's this kind of, there's a margin of error that exists there, and it's easy to fall on either side of that. So getting your head right around peaking, understanding what peaking is and why we're doing it and how to do it, and the kind of what nots to do is really important at this sort of time. It can be easy. Not easy. It can be used to save a bad prep, or it can turn a really good prep into a really bad finish.
I think the important note to start with is that, like all of the discussions we have, I think this one is a discussion of principles, right? It's not necessarily about this is the best method of peaking for everyone, but here are the things you need to look at in terms of why you're peaking, what are you peaking for, how is that going to look in a training plan or in a whole cycle context, and then how do you experiment with it for yourself? Because like we can all just give you peaking blocks that we've written and that work, but will that be the best thing for you? Perhaps not. So like with everything, I think it's important to understand and acknowledge the principles first before you start talking too much about methods.
Yeah, exactly. I think the best place to start this conversation is kind of talking about what peaking actually is. So peaking is not... peaking doesn't make you stronger. That's the most important thing to take away from this. Peaking is this kind of the art of maximizing the strength that you've built in the training blocks leading up into the composition. So it's getting geared up to express the strength that you've built, 1 rep max, squat, bench, deadlift. It's really developing the skill or honing in the skill of 1 rep maxes, right?
I like your use of the term geared up, just quietly. But anyway, I think that's
you will.
Exactly. I think that's the really important point, right? This is not like in that last 4 or 5 weeks, whatever the length of your peaking block is, you're not going to get any stronger. You can get better. Right. You can express your strength better, and you can essentially make it more specific, but you're not getting any stronger. The work's been done by that point. And so I think this is where a lot of people really fuck their peaking cycles up, is they panic about like, oh, I haven't had as good of a prep as I could have, so I'm just going to do all this extra work and try and get way stronger in the last 3 or 4 weeks. There's a pretty good chance you're just going to hurt yourself, or at the very least do something stupid and end up just ruining your whole training cycle's worth of work.
Mm-hmm. So getting into the sort of principle side of things, when I define peaking, or like if I'm talking through peaking with clients or with mentoring clients or whoever it may be, for me, peaking exists in the 90% plus range, and the reps are 3 reps or less. And, it's in a linear fashion. So you progress your peak from, say, 90%, 92%, 3 reps into 2 reps, singles, up until sort of 97 to 102% based on however you've structured your training leading into that. Not everyone works with percentages, but the heart of the conversation is that they're heavy doubles and singles, really.
It's about specificity, right? It's about...
That's right.
As we've said, it's about preparing you for the competition and allowing you to express the strength that you've built in a competition format, which is 1 rep, max attempt, squat, bench, and deadlift. So it would stand to reason that the increase in specificity means that the number of reps you're doing comes down and the weight goes up, because that's what the sport is. The sport is squat, bench, and deadlift for a 1 rep max. And so the best way to get the most out of your peaking cycle is to do a lot of singles and doubles and low rep, high weight stuff that is as close to competition conditions as you can make it.
That's right. The other part of that is, in training, we work on this idea of like progressive overload. So we're working in blocks where we slightly, increase across the block. At the ends, we may overreach before we deload. We're trying to make things hard. We're trying to build accumulated fatigue. In a peak, you're trying to stay relatively fresh. So we're removing a lot of the fluff. So you're not going to do hypertrophy in a peaking block. You're not going to build muscle. You're not going to try and get any fitter. You're not going to try and get any stronger. The accessory work at that point is really staying moving. So keeping your joints moving through a healthy range, keeping them stimulated, making sure you don't tighten up and lose positions. B, the mental tick over of like training. C is, enhancing stability and, again, making sure everything's moving well. So your accessory work changes quite a bit in terms of intensity. The intensity comes down quite a bit. And also, it's serving a different purpose. So you feel a bit fresher, and that can mess with people's heads. They're like, I feel really good. And then they go too hard, and that can mess up your peak. It's like, once you get into your peaking block, that last sort of 4 weeks, all your eyes are then on the prize. It's like you can see the finish line. You don't want to do anything in that gap between where you are and the finish line that's going to make you trip up and slow you down.
Yes.
So you're going to be feeling fresh, and you're saving that energy, conserving that energy to make sure that when you get to the specific stuff at the start of your workout, your 1 or 2 rep squat or bench or deadlift, that you're performing it well with good skill, with good technique, that you're thinking about it. So by the time you get on the platform, you don't have to think about it. It's automatic, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to touch on the point about accessory work and things like that. Your peaking block is not the time to start adding in a bunch of things you've not done before. It's not a time to add in different variations that you haven't trained with, or new movements, or, adding wraps in if you've never used wraps before, or all of these things where like you want to keep the variables to the lowest possible number, right? Because it's about specificity. It's about setting you up for performance on the competition platform. So if you're like, oh, well, I'm doing all this peaking stuff, I'm going to start adding in reverse band squats and all these things that I haven't done before, there's a pretty good chance, like you said, you're going to trip up in view of the finish line, and you're going to end up in a position where you've ruined a perfectly good training cycle, right? The idea that you're not getting any stronger in that last 4 weeks, but you can definitely get weaker and you can definitely hurt yourself. So it's really important to just understand that there's a time and a place for experimenting with new variables, experimenting with new movements, and all of those sort of things. And 4 to 5 weeks out from a comp is not that time.
The way I like to vision it, the way I like to vision training for powerlifting in general, if I'm like even ages away from a competition, say 16 weeks, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do this competition. It's like, all right, well, now I need to bubble wrap myself and not do anything else, because like, life is scary. The world is painful, ages away when a competition isn't in my mind. It's like, okay, well, I'll go for a walk. I'll play a little bit of sport. I'll ride my bike. I'll do whatever. I'm not scared of getting hurt. When it's coming into a peak, that's like ultimate bubble time. You need to be like existing in your little bubble, being very careful about what you do outside of those main lifts, and experimenting with crazy things in the gym is not the thing to do. The hard part of that, especially if you're an immature lifter, is that when you come into the peak and it's like you deload, you're ready for your peak now. You come in, you're doing doubles and singles. It's you're expressing your strength after a long period of training and not seeing how strong you are. You're feeling really good because you're fresh. So you're feeling good and you're feeling strong. The temptation is going to be there to do dumb shit.
Yes.
Don't do that dumb shit.
And that's the thing. I've often said to people, I've had this conversation with countless lifters over the years, is, you know, that like somewhere between 3 and 5 weeks out from a meet, maybe 3 and 6 weeks out, they come to me and they're like, man, like everything feels really heavy and I feel really tired and like I'm just not enjoying this. I'm reconsidering doing the meet. And I've said more than once, like, no, like you're ready. Like it's right there. I always joke about it, but I'm serious when I say that. If like 3 to 6 weeks out from a meet, you don't fucking hate powerlifting and you don't despise every decision you've made to get you to that point in your life, and you question everything and everything hurts and you're a bit tired and cranky and moody and just generally a bit of a prick, then you probably haven't trained hard enough. Like that's the point. This discussion about overreaching, right? The way training works and the principles of like super compensation and stuff like that is that you do so much work that you can't recover from it. And then when you do reduce the volume, you increase the intensity a bit, you you decay some of that fatigue, you end up in a position where on comp day, you feel fucking amazing. Like that's the idea, right? Is to bring you into competition, holding as much of your strength as you can, with the best skill set for the lift that you can, and put you in the position where you feel fresh and ready to go on the day. This is the discussion I've had with people, is about the difference between building and testing strength. Training in the, you know, last like 12 to 16 weeks from a meet is about building strength. It's not about testing your strength. And this is where a lot of people, especially with some of the more fluid training methods that revolve around heavy singles and stuff like that all the time, you end up in a position where like what it is you're just testing your strength all the time. If all you fucking do is test your strength every week, you're not actually building any strength. You're not getting any stronger. You might get better at
really good at failing the same weights over and over. Exactly.
And what's the fucking point, right? You don't get stronger failing reps. You get stronger building capacity over time. And so again, like I think 3 to 6 weeks out, you should probably hate yourself a little bit. You should probably hate the sport a little bit, because that's how you know you've done the work. And peaking's the time to realize that work, right? It's sometimes referred to as like a realization phase, depending on how technical you want your jargon to be. And it's about refining skill and putting you in a position to perform your best on a competition day, right? That's part of the reason I think that the people that I enjoy spending time with and talking to, put more value on competition numbers than they do on training numbers. Because anyone can look good in a gym, on Instagram, in their own backyard, with no pressure and, you know, potentially uncalibrated weights and a bunch of other things, and maybe a spot that's actually not a spot. It's a person helping you stand up in your squat. And like that shit's really easy, but putting it on the line on a day at a time that is defined and unwavering is the really fucking hard part about powerlifting, right? Is realizing that strength at your best on that day. And that's I think that's why comp numbers for me are more valuable than training numbers, because you can set up your conditions to be perfect on a training day, and if they're not perfect, you can just skip it and do the next day. But if your conditions aren't perfect on comp day, then you're fucked. Or maybe you're not fucked. Maybe you just are in a position of less advantage. But how you respond to that challenge is the important part, I think. So doing a bunch of dumb shit in training just because it looks cool on Instagram might be great for your Instagram following and your $20 ebook sales, but it's probably not going to do shit for your comp lifts, right? Your competition results. And ultimately, if you're a powerlifter or you call yourself a powerlifter and you're not reliant or measuring your progress on competition numbers, then I think you're missing the point. So
that was fucking awesome, man.
Thank you. I'm getting better at ranting without just saying fuck every second word. But it's still such a fucking versatile word. So to get into the more specific end of things, why don't you take us through how you think about a peaking cycle and what a peaking cycle looks like for you?
Yeah, sure. So I'll modify the peaking cycle to be 4 to 5 weeks based on the lifter. And I think that's probably something we won't get too in depth on because it's going to change based on the lifter's experience, body size, the weight they're lifting. And that's getting kind of really nitty gritty. This is more of a general principle sort of thing.
Yeah. So, and I think
But
those
again-
principles are important to touch on. Like, what are the principles or what are the things you look at when you're modifying things? Like you mentioned them briefly there, but can you perhaps explain them a little bit in a little bit more depth?
Yeah,
those
sure.
That
So,
don't understand those factors.
To answer the first question, it's like, well, I'll start at either doubles or triples, again, depending on the lifter themselves, and I'll touch on what I mean by that at the end of this. If it's triples, it's around 90%. If it's doubles, starting about 92%, and then we'll add 2.5% a week, drop a rep a week. And normally it'll look like for me, either triples, doubles, singles, and then maybe a week of openers. And if it's 5 weeks, if it's 4 weeks, it might be doubles, singles, something like that. Set wise, no more than 4 sets. So maybe I might go 4 triples, 4 doubles, 3 doubles, 3 singles, 2 singles, something like that.
Yeah.
I kind of got a reputation for a long time there of doing something slightly weird in a peak where sort of 11 to 12 days out of the comp, or maybe it's more like 10 to 12 days out of the comp, I would get people to go through their openers and seconds, squat, bench, deadlift on one day. So what they would do is they would like run through most of their peak, then they'd do like a heavy squat, a heavy bench, deload the rest of the week, so deload their deadlift and their next bench, do a light session at the start of the next week, do their openers and seconds on say the Wednesday, do a volume bench day on say the Friday or Saturday, do their opening benches again on the Monday, and then comp day that weekend. And I did that for years and years, and I found I like it, I enjoy it, but only in the last sort of 6 to 12 months have I gone away from that model, just because I'm seeing so much more value in just work. So I will still give that model to someone with less experience and less confidence, because the more experience and confident you get as a lifter, the more you can walk into a competition. The numbers don't really mean anything to you, especially with openers and seconds. When you're a new lifter, no matter how much we can say this stuff to you, it's hard to turn that rationale into actually, removing the emotion from it. So people put so much weight and fear into openers and seconds. It's like, forget. You ask yourself this: are you going to the comp to fail your 3rd attempts? No one's going to say yes. They're all going to say no, right? I'm going to the comp to get all 9 attempts. Okay, well then your openers and seconds don't matter. Stop putting so much importance and weight into them. They're just your last warm-ups. The 3rd attempts is all that matters, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be unknown, and that's going to be determined by what you do on the day. So it's like, okay, well, we want to have a good plan for the openers and seconds. So having that testing day always kind of solidified that plan. But what I've found now is that with more experienced lifters, doing that session, because it kind of mirrors a comp day, but not quite. It's going to be a lot shorter. You're going to have a lot less food and rest. And if you're squatting, 350 kilos, doing all 3 lifts in a short succession is a bit too taxing. So what I started doing was rather than openers and seconds, just openers or even last warm-ups altogether in that day. But then it's like, well, we've just wasted too much time deloading into that session. So now I've rather than doing that, I've put more value on work, and we front load the work a little bit more. So hopefully we get a little bit more out of comp day. So we should see some much better peaking from my lifters this pro roll coming up, implementing that method. Well, when I talk about the differences in different lifters, it really comes to that point there. It's like the bigger you are and the stronger you are, the more fatigue that you create, the more rest that you need, and the taper leading into the peak day. So it's like you work up into a peak, you peak your strength, but then you need to decay the remaining fatigue. And it's like, make sure the strength stays up here, the fatigue's up here. We need the fatigue to go down so the strength can bump up a little bit, or you can express that strength perfectly on comp day. So it's
for
like,
anyone listening and not watching the video, Thomas's hand was higher when he said up here and then lower when he said down here, in case you haven't picked up on that. I sometimes forget that people don't watch the videos and can't see the facial expressions.
So the bigger and stronger the lifter, the more fatigue they're going to create just by doing those singles, and thereby the more rest they're going to need. So for a less experienced lifter, I'd have them doing a very heavy deadlift. I'd have them doing a very heavy deadlift the week before the competition, whereas a bigger, stronger lifter, they might do a heavy squat and bench that week, but they won't deadlift. So effectively, their last heavy deadlift will end up being about 2 weeks away from the competition. Last squat about a week and a half. So last heavy deadlift sort of, what would that be? 16, 17 days. Last heavy squat, sort of 13 days. Last heavy bench, maybe 12 days. And then my camera battery's gone dead. We're going to have to have a picture of my face for the rest of the video on YouTube. Hashtag professional.
See what I
But
have to work
for a
with,
less
people. This is what I have to work with.
For a less experienced lifter, obviously you can do a little bit more work leading into the comp. Not
Yeah.
only can you, but you also should do a little bit more work leading into the comp, because powerlifting 1 rep max is a skill, right? And skill
Exactly.
training is about maintaining that skill. To maintain that skill, you need to do it. And for someone less experienced, you'll lose that skill a little bit quicker.
Yeah, so that I think that's one of the bigger changes I've made in the way I write peaking programs in the sort of last 6 to 12 months is that I've gone away from a peaking cycle that's heavily focused on doubles and triples and put more emphasis on the singles, because I coach a lot less elite lifters than you do. Most of the lifters I'm coaching are a little bit less experienced, and so they need more exposure to the skill of a heavy single, and understanding what it takes mentally and physically to prepare yourself for a heavy single. So like the peaking cycle that a few of my guys are running into states is essentially like nearly 3 weeks of just singles, right? And the singles get progressively heavier, and there's a little bit of an increase in volume and then a decrease. But it's emphasizing the skill set that is the competition day. So we increase the frequency a little bit. And who are you waving at? Me? Are you waving at me?
No, I want to interrupt and ask a question. So
Yes.
3 weeks of singles, in the initial phases of that, so say the first week of singles, do you also put work underneath? Like, are they doing
Yes.
singles and then some like 85% triples or something like that?
Singles and some doubles, and then decaying that into just singles.
Yeah.
I tend to go with somewhere in the like 5 to 10 day range for a last heavy bench, a sort of 7 to 12 days for the heavy squat, and 10 to 15, 16 days depending on who the person is for a last heavy deadlift. So a similar sort of window in terms of where you're at for last heavy lifts, but like with some of, especially the lighter, it tends to be lighter females, and especially I think with bench, they seem to benefit more from holding those benches heavier, like really low volumes, but holding heavy singles for longer in the bench, because it's a skill that decays so quickly. So I think it's like you said, it's important to understand the skill aspect of the sport. And as you become more experienced, as you become a better lifter, perhaps your peak can have less emphasis on just singles and can have more work in the doubles and triples range, because a heavy double can give you a pretty accurate representation of where you're going to be come singles time. Whereas the discrepancy between what a heavy double can be, like a heavy double that a less experienced lifter can do, and what that compares to in terms of what they can do for a single, might be a really big difference. So understanding where you are in your training lifetime and your training experience, I think, is really important. And this is the overarching topic of self-awareness that we've spoken about a lot, and I think continue to emphasize, is just being able to be critical of yourself without judgment. Like, it's not that you're a bad person because you're only 3 years into training, but it's just being aware of where you are and what that means for you in terms of what process is going to work best for you come competition day. So the peak that I'm running with a few of my guys, that I've got a few guys doing our novice comp, so they've all sort of started that this week, because it's like 3 weeks out. And especially for a novice lifter, like, first handful of comps, I'm probably going to have you do your openers like on the Monday before the comp. At the very least, openers for a squat and bench, and then maybe like a last warm up for a deadlift.
Yeah.
It's confidence boosting more than anything else, knowing that you can feel that weight and you can feel good, and it gives me a good indication of where they're at openers wise, because I generally try and organize it so that everyone comes in as a group and we get to do it as like a bit of a team, rather than having people on all different days, because it's nice to then have everyone in and and get the team environment going a bit more, but also helps me get a good gauge of where people are at. Like I imagine you're the same in this, that like I can see your opener or what I think your opener is going to be, and I can give you a 5 to 10 kilo window of what you're going to hit for a third. Because sure. I know what an opener should look like. I know what bar speed means. I know all of these things just because it's simple pattern recognition, right? I've watched enough people fuck their openers up and then end up with shitty thirds or missing thirds. So I know
that lifter.
Exactly.
You know where they're going to break down. You know where the cracks are going to show, and you know how quickly that's going to manifest once you add a little bit of weight.
Exactly. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, but I wanted to get. I spent some time obtaining all of the IPF Worlds results, and it's probably an open powerlifting thing would actually be way more interesting. I might talk to the guy that I am doing some coaching with who works with open powerlifting about doing a statistical analysis of openers versus thirds, and like what the percentage jumps are between openers and seconds and thirds, and what that means for misses and makes and stuff like that. Because I think that would just be interesting data to have, right? To give you a pretty good indication of like,
sure.
If you miss your opener, you're less likely to get your second, those sort of things. And so yeah, it all comes, I think, back to the skill practice thing. And the more skilled you are, the less you have to practice that skill to maintain the skill. So your peak when you're 15 years into training and you've got an elite level total is probably going to look a little bit different to your peak if you're 3 years into training and you've got a class 1 total or something like that. So just being aware of where you are, and that's why principles are important, right? We can give you a perfect peaking cycle for one lifter, but it's not going to work if you're not that one lifter.
That's right. And I think that's the heart of this conversation is about the principle, because, I mean, like, you can't walk away and be like, oh, John peaks like this, Thomas peaks like this. It's like, I've written, collectively between us, we will have written well over 1,000 peaks for different lifters over the years.
Exactly.
It's like, the other thing to consider with that is, like, if you're peaking yourself, you've got one competition, one opportunity every 3 to 4 months, 6 months to test your theory. It's like, we've tested these theories a million times. We know what we're doing at this point. And the principle is everything, because each peak is going to look a little bit different based on the lifter's circumstances, based on their experience, based on where they fail, where they succeed, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And as well, coming back, like I asked you that question, okay, well, you're doing the singles. I explained my peak as like, it's triples, doubles, singles. It doesn't mean that's the only work we're doing in terms of skill development. Even when they are doing those heavy doubles and singles, like on squat day, for example, I might still give them some, if they're a sumo puller, some tempo sumo work to blocks, or on the deadlift day, I might give them some tempo squats to hone in that skill and to continue to practice and manifest good position and all that sort of stuff that's lower intensity, lower fatigue producing, so they can hone in skill without detracting from the peak themselves.
Do you have any thoughts sorry, just to interrupt, on the skill development thing? So one of the things I use, again, with less experienced lifters, is like in those last couple of strength blocks, we'll add in like a top single for the day, and it's never like, I want you to go for 102% every time you squat, but it's like, I want you to hit maybe 2 singles in the like 88 to 94% range, because it helps refine that skill in an ongoing way. Is that something you've used in the past? Is it something you see value in? Or I don't do it heaps, but I definitely have done top set stuff before, mainly with head case lifters. Yes. With lifters that are like, I have to feel the weight. And it's like,
even though that doesn't align with my philosophy necessarily, it's like, is a 85% double really going to add that much fatigue and cause that much damage in terms of the trade-off that it's going to provide for the satisfaction of the lifter? Well,
yeah, and the mental stability of the process.
That's right. Yeah. So in those sort of cases, I will. Otherwise, I don't see that much value in it. It really comes down to, and again, it's about the purpose of that. It's about, like last week's episode, why are we even doing that? And if you can justify it and it has a good reason, by all means, go and do it. I think it's because if you're just doing an 85 double or a 90% single as your top single before you're working sets, say 8 weeks out, it's like, are you actually practicing the skill, or are you just lifting heavy because you feel like it?
Yes.
Because if you're going to do an 85% double or a 90% single, it's like, okay, well, forget speed, focus on getting this perfect, practice the comp calls and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's another thing.
That's the reason I use it, is as a, like, I set the expectation with this single isn't about you testing where you're at today. It is about you doing the heaviest weight you can do perfectly. And so I'll generally give them a range and say, like, okay, it's 88 to 92%. I want you to hit somewhere in that, in that window. I want you to hit a single, and I want it to be the best single you can do today at the heaviest weight. And if that means you hit 88% and it's good, great. If you hit 92% and it's a bit average, I'm probably going to tell you to hit 88% and get more out of it, because it's about the reason behind it. It's skill development, and skill development doesn't happen with average reps. I know you've said it before, and I continue to say it. At some point, I'm going to stop using you as the reference for why I say it. I'm just going to claim it as my own. But the idea
Copyright infringement.
Exactly. The idea that what you look like under a max rep is an average of every rep you do in training. And so if you are doing average reps, come comp time, you're going to look real average, and it's going to manifest itself in missed attempts and poor attempt selection and stuff like that. But if every rep you do in training, or at least the majority of the reps you do in training, are really, really high quality, then you're going to get the payoff come comp time.
That's right. It's about creating predictability. That's what technique is about. Not only just honing the strongest, safest, most efficient way of lifting, but in doing that, you create consistency and predictability. So you know that when you get to the top end, you've got a more accurate. You don't have to account for, I got out of position. Something weird happened. It's like, okay, well, the more we can reduce that opportunity of unpredictability, the more we can accurately pick numbers, and the higher we can push that.
I like saying to people, I don't mind if you're shit, as long as you're consistently shit, because we can work with consistently shit. If you're inconsistently shit, then we have issues.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked a lot about the stuff that you should do in a peak. If you had to pick a few absolutely do not do this in a peak, what comes to mind? I can start if you want some more thinking time.
Yeah, you start. There's a couple of things, but you start, because I want to see what you say first.
Do not cut weight. If you're 4 weeks out, if you're coming into your peak and you're like, oh shit, I'm 6 kilos heavier, let's jump into a massive calorie deficit. Let me promise you, you are going to have a very bad time. Do not cut weight in your peak. Either be more fucking prepared or go to the next weight class up. Either that or get really good at doing a water cut. Either that or invest in a lot of diuretics, unless you're in a drug-tested federation. Because that's just peaking suicide. It's strength suicide. To be in, to maximize the strength that you have, you need to be isocaloric or hypercaloric. Sorry. You need to be in a state.
That's what you get for using big words.
That's right. You need to be in maintenance or a slight surplus. You cannot be in a calorie deficit and expect your peaking to go well.
Yeah.
That has to be the number, because it's something. It sounds so fucking easy to get right, but so many people do this. They're like, okay, well, now I'm getting closer to the comp, I better think about making weight. So, no, you've thought about it all wrong. This is the key part. This is the most important time. You need to be at weight or within striking range of weight if you're doing a cut when you start your peak, not through your peak.
I think on the same note, I like the weight cut was definitely going to be one of my top two there. I think the other one that I see a lot of people do, and we've already mentioned it, but the like adding a bunch of variations or like overload work is one of those things that I think is really dangerous to play with. Sure, if you're as Thomas said, and I'm firmly placing this one in your court, not in mine, head case lifters, people who lack the confidence in their ability. Perhaps a little bit of overload work, like a heavy squat walkout or a heavy squat unrack and hold or something like that, maybe has some validity because it'll help you increase your confidence. But if you're doing things like reverse band squats with 125% of your squat max, or board pressing 125% of your squat max, or something like that, your squat max, I'd be impressed if you could board press 125% of your squat max. But if you're doing that sort of overload work and the overload you're getting is outside of like 5 to 10%, it's probably not very useful for you in terms of developing the skill. There's definitely the argument for the confidence side of things. But once you go beyond that 10% window, I think you're probably just cheating more than you are actually getting anything useful out of it. At that point, it just becomes an ego stroking exercise. And you're welcome to stroke your own ego. That's why we have a podcast. This is basically just one big circle jerk. But doing it and expecting to get good comp results is probably not going to be a good thing to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't know about you, but fuck, I've been there. I've been the fucking idiot lifter. 2015, I smoked you at Equipped Nationals, and then I went on to do GPC Raw Worlds.
What did you squat?
Hey?
What did you squat?
I believe on Glossbrenner points.
Glossbrenner.
It's kind of irrelevant.
Formulas are for small, weak people, and it's their excuse to be small and weak.
Formulas for baby.
Although I think you out-totaled me on that day as well.
Yeah, irrelevant. We don't talk about that. Anyway, did Equipped Worlds, I did Equipped Nationals, and then I went on to do GPC Worlds Raw, and I did my training, did my peak, and came into deload, and for some reason I thought it was a good idea to do heavy equipped singles as my deload week. And I wouldn't say that it screwed up my peak, but it was just a really fucking dumb thing to do.
Yeah, dude.
I pulled 350.
Risk reward at that point is skewed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I pulled 350 in the suit, which was my all-time best deadlift in the fucking deload week of my peak for GPC Worlds. Now, granted, my competition at GPC Worlds went terribly, but not because of strength issues. That was more because of bone issues. Surgery has now fixed that.
Or
well, a little bit of both, I guess.
I'm excited. Oh, I can see.
Any other major do nots in your peaks?
I think that we've already touched on most of them. I think the big thing is just not changing anything that you're doing. Like trusting the process is really important.
That's right.
Whether you have a coach or you're self-coached or whatever it is, you have to trust the process. Because in the end, like if you have a bad meet, it's like, and I've been guilty of this, have a bad meet, be really shitty about it, be in a fucking mood about it, and just be a bit of a prick. But actually, like a bad meet's just a really good learning experience, right? If you're capable of objective analysis of your efforts, then perhaps it takes you a week to get over the sads about your shitty meet. But your shitty meet's a great way to learn what not to do, right? I've done it. I know the best deadlift I've ever pulled in the gym, I pulled 282 and it was like 2.5 weeks out from a meet. And like it was an accidental 37 kilo PB that day. I was like, oh, I'll pull a small PB. It was easy. I pulled another PB. It was still easy. So I just fucking let my ego get in the way and I pulled a huge PB and it was great. But I fucking sucked at the meet because I peaked too early, right? Like I let my ego get in the way and I fucked it up. And 3 weeks out from a meet, I was as strong as I should have been on comp day. And so... trusting the process is really important, not succumbing to the ego boost that is hitting a PB in the gym, because as we mentioned earlier, no one gives a fuck about your gym PBs. So just having faith in the process and understanding that letting the time do its work is the important thing. Don't change a bunch of factors. Don't try a bunch of new things. Don't cut a bunch of weight or add 70 million reverse bands and chains and 7 boxes so you can squat high. But trust the process, practice the skill, and know that comp day is where it matters. If you can pull it all together and you hit that comp day and you feel good and you feel fresh and the weights feel good, then you're in business. But if you sacrifice feeling good on comp day for a bit of a circle jerk during your peak, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, I think the timing thing is a big thing because it's something we'd both see happen a lot. And you'd see, if you follow lifters, you'd see it happen all the time. Like, if you've got the energy to max out and hit a PB the week after comp and exceed the lifts that you did at comp the week after, you've missed time to peak.
Fucked your peak up. Yep.
if you've peaked right on comp day, that should be everything, and you should be fucked for at least a week after the comp.
I tell most of my lifters, regardless of your performance, I don't want to see you in the gym the week after the comp.
Yeah.
I want you to go outside and have some fun and, you know, do things that aren't just lifting straight up and down in a line.
So not peaking too early, not peaking too late, making sure your peak is timed into the comp is really important too. And I think that's probably a really good note to finish this off.
I think so too. I think that covers everything we need to know. Well, maybe not everything you need to know, but at least most of what you need to know about peaking. That's right. Tell your friends, share this with your mum, give us 5 stars, tag us in your Instagram things. We like finding useless gifts to add to your Instagram posts. Yeah, that's about it. I don't have anything much more to add. Do you, Thomas?
Yeah, no, we're still terrible at finishing.
We are. Terrible at starting, terrible at finishing, but the middle bit's the good bit, so that's what matters.
Yeah, that's right. Go have a good day. We love you. Bye. Was that okay?
I guess so.